So it's 12 o'clock. Thank you everybody again for tuning into this live Q&A with the CEO of Power Metal Resources, Paul Johnson. We do these a fair few times with Paul, and investors do tend to like to put their questions directly to Paul and hear the answers. So that's again what we'll be doing today. A lot of questions have already been submitted. I'm sure there'll be more submitted as and when we go through. Please just put them in the chat, or towards the end you can indeed unmute yourself. That will be allowed, and you can actually ask it directly if you like. So I'll be fielding the questions. Those that know me, my name is Mark. I work for Stockbox, and joining us today is, of course, Paul Johnson, the CEO of Power Metal Resources, and Oliver Friesen, who is the CEO of Golden Metal Resources, but also Power Metal Resources Exploration Manager. So it's great to have you both on with us today. Paul, I imagine let's start with you. With the focus on everyone's mind, I would imagine, is Molopo, and that's indeed where the bulk of the questions that I have in front of me have been coming from, and with regards to. So, could you perhaps just start us off, give us a bit of a high-level overview of the current program that's going on at Molopo there? Of course, you're currently drilling a high priority target, which is relating to the magnetic conductor that you recently clipped the edge of, where there were visible nickel sulfides. But only yesterday, another high priority target, that's T2 to 3, was also announced. So could you just give us the lowdown on the exploration and bring us up to speed on the latest status?
Yes, hello Mark, and hello everybody. Congratulations if you've made it in the junior resource space this far and you're listening in on a Friday. I think you deserve a medal, to be honest. It's been an incredible time in the space. I'm getting too old now, and I know that when these difficult phases come along, they're followed almost exactly by a real boom phase in the space. And we're looking forward to that. We are positioned at Power Metal for that, with many interests across the globe, many of them district scale with tremendous opportunity. You were quite right, Mark. The focus in many people's minds is on Molopo. We, of course, as a business, have to run Molopo and also look at all the other areas of our company, which we are keeping going at some pace. But on Molopo, it's quite rare for a junior resource company to sink 500-meter plus holes. The reason is, if you spend too much money on drilling, you don't have enough to pay salaries and all the other costs of keeping the corporate vehicle going in many vehicles that you see in the junior resource market generally. We're a bit bolder than that. We know that the major discoveries to come in the future will often come from this type of exploration. And there is a degree of risk with it, not just the financing risk, which you can defray to a certain extent, as we have done with Molopo, by having a good proportion of the cost of the drilling paid out in shares at a significant premium to where we are today at 2.25 pence, actually, I think. But the outcomes are uncertain. And that's a big issue for a company like ours with a program like Molopo. We have to make sure that we do as much preparatory work as possible. And in the case of Molopo Farms, that preparatory work has been undertaken in some cases over decades with some of the people involved in this project. Certainly since 2014-15, there's been a far more intense effort. And in recent years, there have been layered exploration programs undertaken to refine the targets. And the quality of the work that was undertaken was demonstrated by hole K16 from, I think it was early 2021, we published the findings, where we had broadly nickel mineralized drill core from circa 300 meters down to the end of hole 600 meters. What subsequently transpired is that when we correlated that drill hole with the conductor that was identified from recent geophysics, the T16 conductor, that the drill hole effectively clips the edge of that big conductor. So the proposition is simple, really. If we found quite an interesting grade of nickel at the edge of that conductor, what lies in the center at the core? And that's what we're testing now with this program. It's a 2,600 meter program, or at least that's where it sits at the moment. Who knows where it may go, depending on the results that we find in the coming weeks and months. We are on the first hole. we obviously have to be very cautious. We've put out images at the top of the hole for investors to see the drill rigging operation, to see the drill core coming out. But as that hole goes lower and it moves to the target zone, of course, the sensitivity increases. And so does our specific commentary, which has really to be limited to the RNS. We're planning 2 holes into the T16 conductor. In parallel, we've been pushing ahead quite aggressively with geophysical work, and we've released a number of announcements recently confirming that we had a very large conductor at T16. We have a significantly bigger conductor at target T23, and today we've announced the latest findings from the conductor at T13. So we now have 3 A+ targets, and we also have a B target at T114, which was one of the sites we drill tested in the 2021 3-hole program. So we're looking to drill the 3 A+ targets in this program at a minimum. We are going to take it as it comes with the results that we find along the way. And we obviously, until we get those results out, we don't really know precisely where the full program will be. But of course, we're intrigued to see what the outcome is. So I don't know if that gives you a good summation, Mark. I probably waffled on a bit too much, but it is quite an exciting project for us.
No, that's a good summation, Paul. Just a quick follow-up from that. Obviously, the drills are turning now. Going smoothly so far. Are there no problems to report?
No, drill programs are an interesting thing. It is quite a tricky task to drill, deep holes, and it's done very carefully. Generally speaking, in a 5-6 hole program, 2,600 meters, you would have all sorts of operational challenges on the way. That's absolutely normal in every drill program I've seen and been involved with, and you generally handle them quite efficiently if you have capable drilling teams involved, which we do. So yeah, we're happy.
Excellent, good. Well, Oliver, let me just come to you very quickly, of course, from a geologist's perspective. I think most people will have seen the videos that you've done recently where you can see the 3D imagery there of the ore body and some of the mag there. And without speculating too much, but I'm quite interested to get more of your opinion from a technical side. What could the mag be suggesting, or what are the early indicators telling you? And will you know quite quickly if you're onto something here with the drills?
Yeah, so there's 2 main data sets that we're looking at here, Mark. The first one being the magnetics, the second one being the connectivity. The magnetics, what that tells you is your general geology. So we're looking at it in an ultramafic complex is what it's called. So it's a big sort of body of mafic intrusive rocks, and the mag highs tell us that we're in the right geological environment, because there's lots of other units you're going to find in this part of the world. You'll find different sedimentary units, metamorphic units, and the like. But we're interested in the intrusive units specifically, which correspond to magnetic highs. And then once you're in those magnetic highs, what you're looking for is conductors. And the conductor tells you how conductive the rock is. Sorry, I'm just being told to be a bit louder there. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you hear me all right, Mark?
We can hear you. It's just it is a little bit quiet, but we can hear you.
Yeah. No, I'll speak up then. So yeah, once we're in the magnetic highs, we know we're dealing with those intrusive units. We're looking for connectivity anomalies or big conductors, right? So once we have those conductors, that's the area that we're going to focus on. Now at 1.6, what a lot of companies do is, especially in these environments where there is, there's cover where you don't have much outcrop. If you see a conductor in your geophysical, results, you don't know what that corresponds to. It could be a lot of different things. I mean, even groundwater, within certain units can create a connectivity response. You don't know what's causing that response. Now, the interesting thing about Molopo specifically is the fact that we know that there are nickel sulfides within the intrusive rocks. So essentially, we've checked off a huge box there. So with 1.6 specifically, we know that there are nickel sulfides there. We have pentlandite. So the conditions within the ultramafic body were suitable for the formation of nickel sulfides. So that's a huge box check, because if you're just going into a new environment, drilling blindly, geophysical anomalies, the odds of success are relatively low. But once you've confirmed the presence of nickel sulfides, it tells you that this entire intrusive complex had the correct conditions to form nickel sulfides. So that's a huge sort of stepping point. And now we're going sort of the next step, which is that we know that there's nickel sulfides here. Where do we find, essentially we're looking for large accumulations of them. So obviously with 1-6, we're off to a great start there. We have the presence of nickel sulfides. Pentlandite specifically is what we're looking for. And we know there's a stronger conductivity response towards the south, which we're now testing. And then that same sort of model holds true for 2-3 and 1-3. We're in the same geological environment, which essentially checks that first main box. We know the intrusive complex is capable of hosting nickel sulfides. And now we found 2 other very strong looking conductors that we're going to be testing as well. So hopefully that sort of answers your question there, Mark.
Yes, indeed. Well, hopefully it's not water, but as you say, the fact that there is already presence of nickel sulfides would be quite surprising, I think, to everyone, would you say, if it did turn out to be water? Yeah,
no, and that's typically higher up, where you're sort of in the water table. These conductors are located around 300 meters, so there's certainly not going to be water.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, the presence of nickel sulfides there already is a huge. It checks a huge box. So yeah, we're excited to say the least to test these other conductors.
Excellent. Okay, well let's stay on Molopo then, and let's start hitting through some of these questions that have been sent in from investors. So the first one, Paul, I guess these will probably mostly relate to you, but do feel free to bring Oliver in if you feel he's more suitable to answer them. But the first question I have is, what is the current situation timescales on the 88% for Molopo? Are POW trying to take or get any of the other 12% of the Molopo Farms complex?
Okay, so in terms of the increase in shareholding in Kalahari Key, the local holding company in Botswana, we have to get certain approvals, and there's a procedure for that, and we're well advanced with that process. You have to submit various documentation through to the Department of Mines, and also you have to send documentation through to the Consumer and Competition Authority. And we've submitted the various documents that are required, as you would expect us to do, and we wait for a response. It's, as I say, a procedural thing. That we're going through that procedure properly. We have a great deal of respect for Botswana, for the Botswana authorities, and we have done this process carefully and properly. So we just wait for their response. If there's any questions or queries, then we'll answer them. But this is not an unusual thing we're doing. It's relatively normal. One of the important points to make here is that we are, as a business, quite keen on spending and investing in Botswana. We're obviously looking for that major discovery, which will be beneficial to us as a company, beneficial to our shareholders, but it will also make a dramatic difference in Botswana with the creation of a vast amount of opportunity, vast amount of employment opportunities, particularly, and financial investment in country. Major nickel discoveries don't happen very often, and when they do, they attract considerable capital. And we're optimistic, of course, that we'll be able to do that with this program. So that's all in hand, and we're moving that forward. On the other 12%, well, no is the answer. The other 12% is 2 shareholders who decided they wanted to stay with this opportunity directly, have a project stake. They will be funding their participation in this as we move forward. We're in touch with them on a regular basis, have a very close relationship with them to make sure that all the decisions that we are taking, we take really together. The agreement that we signed back in May was very clear with regard to the situation once the 88% holding is secured, in that we drive it from an operational perspective. So Power Metal will make the plans and will take the decisions. We also drive it with regard to a corporate perspective. So in the event that certain corporate transactions happen, that we can effectively make that decision, and our fellow shareholders are dragged along with those decisions. Obviously, those clauses are protective of them, so we can't do poor deals. It has to be quite a significant transactional deal for them to be dragged along. But again, with a major nickel discovery, the terms that we have within that relationship agreement effectively with the two other shareholders, I don't think will be too challenging, to say the least. So yeah, we're happy where we are. It's all moving forward nicely, and we're starting to see that big ramp up in activity at Molopo, which is what we always wanted.
Okay, excellent. Well, also just take care of the second question there. Are the other 12% shareholders in Molopo Farms able to keep up with their share of the exploration costs? And you said that that would be the case. So that covers that question off. Now, the next one I have is a fairly long question. I'm concerned about the length of time needed to get lab assay results. On the 18th of June, RNS on Ditto indicated that additionally, Kanye has shipped the first batch of drill core samples from hole DITD-D004 for testing at a certified laboratory in South Africa with fast track analysis requested. To my knowledge, no results have been reported more than 3 months later. That's pretty awful for fast track testing. Most labs give an estimated turnaround period for results. How long will it take to get the nickel assay on Molopo? And can the lab supply expected dates for the same?
Okay, so I'll bring Oliver in on this to a degree. We're going to focus our discussion obviously on Molopo rather than a Ditto, really. The process that we take is to expedite as much as possible. The world in recent times.
Sorry, Paul, I think you've gone very quiet there.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Hello, Paul. I can't hear Paul. Do we have a problem there?
Let's have another go. Is that better?
Yes, you're back. You're back.
Hey, right, okay. Yeah. I'll comment on Molopo rather than anything else or so on. We always like to get the results back as quickly as possible. We have so many programs underway that it's not good to leave things in debate. There can be a lot of reasons why drill results take longer than anticipated.
Sorry, Paul, I think you've gone very quiet again. Let me just...
I'm going to give it one more go. Is that okay?
You sound very good now. Yeah, just stay where you are.
Yeah, I think it might be me positionally. So, there can be a variety of reasons why drill assay results take longer than anticipated. It can be simple issues of lab delays, which we've seen in the last couple of years, some quite extensive lab delays. It can be that you're needing to run check assay results on certain of the results. You have to run them again. You might want to change the method of assay testing to more appropriate to what you're seeing from the samples that you have. It can be that there's some commercial aspect to it where you want to, do something with regard to the project before you release. Not all the results from assays are releasable, in fairness. People have an expectation that everything should be released. That's not necessarily the case. The material findings need to be released to the market. So, and in respect of our programs, wherever possible, we put everything on the fastest possible route to getting the results back. You wouldn't necessarily pay for expedited assays. That usually comes with a cost premium, but we do try and ensure that we're going to get quick turnaround, and we do publish everything pretty much immediately, in fairness, when we're ready to do so. We don't hang around and hold on to results. That's never ever been our policy. We release RNS any time of the day, as people can see, and we do release quite a few. Now, with regard to Molopo, if I hand over to Oliver, he can talk about what's being done there to make sure that we get a flow of results.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, that's a good overview. I mean, there's a lot of sort of factors at play. when it comes to assay times that unfortunately, a lot of them are sort of out of the control of the company. With that being said, we're going to be using ALS laboratory, which is probably one of the more renowned assay labs in the world, and we use them extensively on in many other jurisdictions that we work in. So we have a good relationship, which is sort of one of the important checkbox is just the fact that we know who we can speak to about getting updates on those assays. So ALS will be our go-to for this particular program. With that being said, what we're going to do is we have geotechnicians or geologists on site, and specifically on the rig 24/7. So we're not going to be looking at this core blindly. We have someone on site who can identify sulfides. So we're getting sort of immediate responses and communication from the rig as to what's coming out of the ground there. And with these particular holes and this particular geology, what you're looking at, it's you get a very good visual estimation quite quickly. The pentlandite, it's very stark and it's very easy to identify. So with that being said, when we're drilling these holes, we're going to be getting constant updates from the field. So with that information in hand, we can essentially we can control the type of assay method and the speed at which that comes by doing things like rush assay. So we have a bit more control over that. When you're drilling certain gold properties or different sort of geological environments, a lot of times you have no idea what's in there. And in that case, you just send it to the lab and let the lab do their thing, and you just sort of wait. And a lot of those instances, it can be quite delayed. So we're going to have definitely a head start there because we're going to be able to see and visually estimate as to what we're getting into. But with everything on site, we have a really good team on site there. We have core cutters. Everything is available and ready. So as soon as cores come out of the ground, we're going to be able to process it and have that core sent to ALS in a very quick fashion. So there's not going to be no delays along sort of the chain here. We've made sure that, so everything's going to be efficient. And then we also have the option of potentially doing rush assays if we deem that to be necessary. So we've done everything we can from an operational standpoint to make sure that when core comes out of the ground, we can process it as quickly as possible. And then on the back end, once you actually get the assays in hand, it depends on the company that receives them. A lot of companies, potentially move a bit slower when it comes to processing those, looking at the QA/QC, the check assays, that type of thing. As probably most people on this call know, with Power, we're very good at getting material news out to the market as quickly as we can. So when those assays come in, we're not going to be spending weeks and weeks sort of analyzing them and doing all the other things that some companies might do. We're going to obviously make sure that the QA/QC checks out. And then once we analyze that data, we're going to put it into a form that's releasable and we'll get it out. So we're not going to be sitting on the data. And just a note on Ditto, I believe those results have been released, but that's just sort of a side note. But more importantly, at Molopo, because we are the operator, we are in full control of the full sort of chain of custody. And, we have everything in place to make sure that assays get to the lab, we receive them, and they get out to the market.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Oliver. That explains that process very well. And I'm sure you'll be as keen as investors to get or to see those results, but also, of course, announce them. Nothing more frustrating as if you're able to see them and not able to announce them. It's a very frustrating time. So I'm sure with Power, there'll be lots of announcements going forward with this. So the next question I have, when Molopo is confirmed, this is a bit anticipatory. When Molopo is confirmed as a significant discovery, will Power concentrate almost exclusively on this project and put the rest on the back burner, excluding, of course, these spin-out IPOs?
Oh, no, that's a great question. And for that, you have to go back to the very heart of the company and say, why are we here? And we're here, and it's been on our notes to editors for a long period of time, to make significant discoveries in the portfolio. Now, we've set up various corporate structures and corporate approaches to attack that target. And we have now with Molopo what is clearly our most advanced project in terms of the exploration side of the business. which is potentially leading into a big discovery scenario. How do we handle it? Well, pretty much common sense applies. If you have something that has dramatic value for the world, a major nickel discovery at this time in the cycle of the demand for metals, at a time when there are simply not the nickel pipeline projects for the large firms that they want to have in their portfolios, you wouldn't treat it as just one of 14. You would have to pivot and focus quite materially on that project. We've done that already, in fairness. That is already started within our business, both in terms of financial commitment and also in terms of the commitment of the team. We're spending a lot more time on Molopo, which is exactly what we promised the shareholders of Kalahari Key when we did the agreement with them, that we would accelerate and really move ahead with field exploration, starting with geophysics, an extensive program, leading into this quite large, for a junior, drill program that we have running at the moment. So on, if one assumes a discovery, which is a big assumption, of course, and I have to say that as CEO, otherwise I get into trouble, we will definitely focus a significant amount of our energies on the Molopo project. It isn't just Molopo, though, within the business. We do have a broad spectrum portfolio, and we won't let everything else wither on the vine because we don't provide it with capital or some degree of attention. We have a great team inside POW. We're 10 team members in total, and we're looking to grow that team. We also have an extensive advisor network that we can reach out to, both individuals in country through to organizations that help us with our corporate work in London. So we can leverage those relationships and those team members to do various things across the portfolio. So you would see with a major discovery that the business does pivot, and it will be very clear in the public domain that the focus will be on Molopo. However, we will not just sacrifice everything because we have a major project. We will still seek value. We may change our approach in terms of how we go about elements of our business. We may look for value crystallization sooner because we want to spend time and focus on Molopo, and we have to account for that. But without question, Mark, there will be a change of approach and a focusing on Molopo on discovery.
Okay, excellent. Yes, I do like the confidence in that question. Top marks there for asking it in that way. And let's hope it does turn out to be a significant discovery. And just following on the same theme, the next question I have is: I assume we will need significantly more cash for proving up the asset in order to get a better deal at the negotiating table, and therefore cash preservation on other projects may be required.
Well, okay, yes, I mean, that's obvious. However, I would say if you look at nickel discoveries made in the past, major nickel discoveries lead to quite dramatic revaluations in the companies holding those projects. And there never seems to be a shortage of capital in almost, well, any market conditions that I've seen for companies that make major nickel discoveries. So it would be, I suspect, the least of our issues, as it were. It's always difficult to talk about the cash question because it really does worry people, and it should do at the moment, because many companies out there can't raise capital anywhere near the market and have to take big discounts or terms which are really not favourable for the existing shareholders. And that's not ever been our policy in this business. We've always tried to give investors the confidence that if you buy a share at one price on a Friday, you won't wake up on a Monday to a heavily discounted financing. And we pretty much stuck to that in some quite difficult conditions. So I think people should have confidence with POW on this front, that we were very careful on that. But I really don't think following the announcements of discovery, you would have an issue with regard to capital at all. In terms of do we need to keep cash there or have cash so we get better deals at the negotiating table. Yeah, that's sensible. Any parties negotiating with you, they will look for your degree of desperation. Now, we're quite confident in our own technical capabilities. You've heard Oliver. I mean, we're dealing with exceptional people in the power business. Not me. I'm just a hanger-on. But some exceptional technical people. We are dealing with some great advisors out there and great people who are working on the ground. So we feel a great degree of confidence we can push on with the project. We're not desperate, and we can raise capital for the projects if it works out to be the discovery we all want it to be. Do we go down the cash preservation route on other projects? Well, no, I don't think so. It's more about the focus of the business and making sure we're not spending too much managerial, technical, or operational time on other interests that have less value, as per the last question. Yes, I mean, it's true that we have to think about how do we handle a major discovery. We have to do some advanced planning for that scenario. We have to think about what would we do with regard to external interest in this project, which there will be on a major discovery, without question. We have to think about what's the best time to engage with parties, because the sooner you engage, the more comfort you have. But you don't necessarily get the best transactional deal for shareholders by jumping into bed with the first partner post major discovery. So it requires a bit of diligence, focus, and careful thought. And that's what we've already started to do. Not because we're crazy or because we think this is a slam dunk, not at all, but because a professional business prepares itself for all scenarios. And one of those scenarios is a major discovery. So it's a great question, but we are really confident with this project and with our business as a whole on the route forward in the event of major success.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Paul. Next question, short and sweet. Is Molopo too big for POW on its own? I'm guessing at this stage, no, but that might change.
It's a large district scale project. It's being proven up with the technical work Oliver's doing with the advisors, particularly the geophysical work that's been done. And obviously the drilling is happening now. It's certainly not too big for us at the moment. But is it looking like a major district scale opportunity? Well, it has for quite a while. Do we understand there are advantages of bringing other parties in? Without question. But as I say, we will see what the results are. And if we're successful, we can make a call on that. What we will do, of course, at all stages is thoroughly explain to shareholders what we're thinking, what we're doing, so that they can see that we're putting a lot of time and energy into really planning this out and making sure that we don't overstretch ourselves. And part of that is by being professional and diligent now and planning for, a major discovery, so that we're not like rabbits in the headlights, and we can see what we have to do. I do have a little bit of experience of this in the Metal Tiger days when I was CEO of Metal Tiger and we made the major copper discovery in Botswana with MOD Resources. I know the dynamic that happens on a discovery and what happens to a business. And I learned from that you build your team in advance. You don't wait for that to happen. You build the best people in the team and the strongest team you can and the strongest advisor network, and you think about all the scenarios before they happen. In a much better place now to be able to deal with major success within the business. And I think that's important. Shareholders know that, so they have the confidence that whatever happens, we are prepared for it.
Indeed, no, very important to be prepared. Nothing. We don't want a rabbit in the headlight situation should it happen. Just an update, if you can, Paul, on the drilling. Is the drilling operation 24/7, and can you update on the approximate depth reached?
Now that would the approximate depth is something that now we're at this point we would not be talking about, because it would be a specific piece of information that would have to be in an RNS. I think I would be hung, drawn, and quartered if I went down that route at this point. But in terms of the drilling operation itself, I'll hand over to Oliver, who can give a little bit more information on this.
Yeah, so it is 24/7. The previous operator, they went with a different drilling company who's also based in Botswana, who do 10-hour shifts. So they essentially, it was 10 hours a day of drilling. And that's one of the reasons that drilling program took as long as it did to drill the 3 holes. So when we were out looking for the drilling contract for this particular job, that was one of the main requirements, was we want a company who offered 24-hour service. So yeah, we're 2 12-hour shifts. 7 and 7 is crew change. And with the company we're working with, even on public holidays, which is actually today in Botswana and this weekend, we will be drilling through the weekend. So that was, we have some really exciting targets here. And one of the main requirements was we want to get some answers quickly. So yes, 24/7 drilling operations down in Botswana at the moment. And that will continue for the duration of the program.
Okay, excellent. And on the, you can't talk about the depth. It's needs to be formally announced, does it?
Yeah, that's correct. That's what. Yeah. So what we'll do is when it we'll address things as they come with the company, and put out any updates in sort of due course. But at the present time, we can't sort of talk about depth or anything like that.
Okay. So again, I think we've perhaps covered this, Paul, but do POW have an agenda in place if Molopo delivers what POW hope for, i.e. will Molopo become the priority project as a consequence, and will the lesser developed projects be available to buy at the right price, or will it be business as usual on all fronts?
It won't be business as usual in the sense that we're pursuing all the projects in the same way as we would have done pre-discovery. We will narrow down and focus. We won't let value be lost in the business in the other interests, but we may change our approach on them, and we may go for value crystallization, say, in certain areas a little bit sooner perhaps than we originally planned. But we certainly wouldn't be giving anything away. One of the advantages with our business, particularly with the recent exchange rate situation, is that over the last 3 or 4 years, we haven't just brought projects in and done nothing with them. We've spent money across our project portfolios over the last number of years, and quite considerable amounts of money on exploration to take the projects up the value curve. So quite a bit of the work that we plan to do on projects prior to transactional corporate activities has already been done and already been paid for. So we're a bit ahead of the game across the wider portfolio, in fairness. And it's a good position to be in if we needed to focus down a bit more on Molopo on the back of exploration success. So, we're not going to hold a discounted fire sale of all of our other interests. We might hold on to them almost as options in some cases. We'll dispose of other interests a little bit quicker than planned. There's all sorts of scenarios available to us. I've been doing the corporate restructuring work for years now, and I've got quite a decent network around the business in various jurisdictions. So if we do need to find crystallization opportunities, then we can do so.
Okay, excellent. Well, that just follows on a little bit onto the next question here, which is regarding raising funds or seeking out a joint venture. If Molopo is as big as suggested, are you able to actually take it forward on your own, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's often not just about the ability to finance. It's about the chance of success. There are certain types of geologies that are quite complex to deal with, and you might get a lucky strike, but then it can be quite difficult. Look at some of the big discoveries around the world, and they often require quite a dramatic amount of capital to take them forward to the next stage, and it can be useful to bring in a partner to certainly help you do that. So we have to form a view on Molopo in the event of success. Let's say in a scenario we have success in T16 in our early holes, as to how confident do we feel that we can attract capital? Well, very confident in the event of discovery. I don't think that would be an issue. And that's certainly what we are told, when we speak to various groups who have exposure to this kind of thing and this kind of event. Will the drilling that we undertake, because there would be a clear expansion in drilling, will it have a reasonable chance of success? Because we are still a junior company. We'll probably be on discovery considerably larger in size. That's the normal valuation uplift that you get post-discovery. But then the junior market and investors generally, particularly at the moment, are not entirely tolerant of failures. Even if the companies involved have had very good intent and very good technical planning, if the drill results don't deliver, there's only so much patience people will have. So we've got to have a degree of confidence if we push forward ourselves that the results will justify that internal investment. And we do feel quite confident with regard to Molopo, with the targets that are emerging, in fairness. And well, that's because of the work that's been done to get those targets out. The very detailed technical analysis, the very careful thought process that goes into building these targets, I think gives us a great degree of confidence. So, again, it's like the other question, which is understandable. We will make careful, thoughtful decisions at each stage with this project, as we have done so far, I think, in fairness, with regard to Molopo, and we will do the same going forward.
Okay. Now, if a discovery is indeed found at Molopo, especially at the edge of the jurisdiction at the T2 to 3 area, would it be possible to extend the license area, and would Power look to do that if funds permit? And just as well as that, is another company doing any work alongside Power in the area or on the edge of the license borders? And if so, does Power know how far advanced they are in terms of any results they've had?
Okay, so I think it's probably useful, Oliver, if you could give a little bit more information on T23 and what was found there, and where the conductor sits with regard to the boundaries of the license.
Yeah, for sure. So actually, someone funny enough asked me this on Twitter the other day. So to answer your question, most of Molopo is surrounded by other licenses. So the opportunity to expand would have to come. We'd have to essentially acquire those or purchase those licenses from existing owners. With that being said, though, in relation to T23 specifically, so the conductor that we found, which sits within a magnetic high, as I mentioned earlier, is where you want to be. Sits along, it's about a 12-kilometer long magnetic trend or magnetic anomaly, magnetic high. And the answer that I gave on Twitter was the fact that, well, the current license as it sits now, we control about 95% of that magnetic lineament or that magnetic anomaly. So in the event that we drill this conductor and it turns out to be mineralized, we would control the vast majority of that structure. So the need to expand to cover the final sort of 5%, I wouldn't be overly concerned about it, because if we have a 12-kilometer long mineralized structure, that extra 5% it's not overly material. So I don't worry about it too much. When you look at our license boundary, and this was, the license has been controlled by our predecessor, Kalahari Key, and Roger Key ran that company, and he's probably he's probably the best geologist when it comes to Botswana and Botswana geology. So when they did the renewals, they had to cut up certain pieces of the license. I mean, I look at the data now, and I'm sort of quite impressed by the work that he's done to maintain these certain areas that are most prospective. And it's funny, as we're continuing to do more work, every time I see the area that was dropped, I mean, he's spot on. So he's like, once again, with T23 specifically, I mean, he's maintained about 95% of that structure. So I'm not too worried about it. We have so much to deal with on our current license. I mean, I think it expands for about 60 kilometers in the northeast southwest direction. So we have a ton to go off of. All of the airborne conductors that we've now upgraded 14, 15, 110, 111, which are essentially we're looking to do additional work on those. Those are all very safely within our license boundaries. So no, I don't worry about it too much. In the event that we make a discovery at T23, potentially we look to expand that last little bit, but we'll have, as I mentioned, a vast majority of that structure. So yeah, it's possible. I mean, to answer your question, we could obviously look to speak to our surrounding neighbors if they wanted to do a deal, but we have plenty to go off of with our current license. And to answer your question about work around us, it's a bit hard to comment on that. The reason being that a lot of the license owners, and I have a list of who they are, they're Botswana holding companies, and sometimes it's hard to find out who the actual eventual owner is. It might be a public company, it might not be. So obviously with us, we're a public company and we release what we're up to. But with a lot of the surrounding licenses, there's not as much transparency because it's hard to find out who is the eventual owner. And if they are, the eventual owner potentially could be private, and therefore they don't release any news anyways. So it's a kind of a word of mouth thing, and potentially, in the towns around this area, there's, you'll see more contractors here and there and drilling trucks and things like that, and people speculate. But as mentioned, it's sort of hard to comment on this one specifically just because of how the ownership structure is here in Botswana.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Oliver. There, that covers that question on both points very well. So that does conclude the questions I have that were sent to me on Molopo. We can check the group in a bit just to see if any further questions have come in. But let's just quickly move on. I have 3 points here on Tati. And the first one is it expected that there will be pre-Christmas news on Tati? So, I mean, that's kind of a general question. So maybe, Paul, you can kind of say yes or no to that one if possible.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Good. That gets that.
I would certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, you could. The reality is with these things, we don't quote timescales very often. Generally speaking, when we do, it's a nightmare because something happens, and I know people want to have a specific timescale as much as possible, and it's just so hard. There's so many different elements that kick in and can affect the delivery of results to the market. We are desperately trying to get data out to the market on our various interests. We do release a fair amount of RNS. We get some criticism for that, but that's because our business is, in my view at least, bigger and better than the vast majority of the competitors on the market in any jurisdiction. We've gone for a big business concept. We've gone for big exploration budgets rather than big corporate budgets. We've really pushed the activity level of the business, and that means we have a duty to report back, and we do try and bring the smaller items, as it were, into the quarterly reports that we're publishing now around every 3 months to give that overview of business operations and also deal with the smaller matters. But the reality is, within our company at this current market capitalization, we have a lot of very material activities, so we have to push that news out. And Tati is a project that we are particularly excited about, and that's one of the reasons why we pushed ahead quickly to do the follow-on drill program, and we're looking forward to getting the assay results out from the work that was done with the RC program. It took a while to get the previous Tati results out, and there were various reasons for that, and it wasn't any lethargy on behalf of the company, I can assure you. We were pushing everything as quickly as we can. It's not the same scenario this time around, so we can optimistically hope that we'll get the results back analysed and out to market far quicker than previously. But ultimately, until you get that data back from the labs, you never know.
No, indeed. Okay, the next question is probably more suitable for Oliver, if you can say anything on this, Oliver. But the question is, what is the expected tonnage volume of the fines dump at Tati, and what grades of gold would make it a viable operation?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, unfortunately, I can't comment on the tonnage specifically, because we haven't put anything out into the public domain yet. We have sort of an internal report that we're working on, which sort of estimates what the volumes might look like. But the more important thing is for us right now is the grades, and we've put out some of those results. So we know what the grades are in general. Now the reality is of the situation, you know, there's nearby operating gold mines, some of them not very far away at all, and this is one of those things where, you know, these mines are looking for additional ore feed. So it's not a big process. We don't go and do a full report on the tonnage that we have there. We have sort of ballpark estimates, but the reality is you move quite quickly to a profit sharing agreement, and then they just start coming and trucking it away. And there's checks and balances that play in place at the actual mine itself. So they do assay on it, and then they do you get the volume measurements, and that's would be all outlined in a profit sharing agreement. So, you know, in terms of tonnage, we have an idea, but, you know, at this stage, what the next step would be to enter into a profit sharing agreement. And following that, within, you know, a couple of days, there would be, you know, haul trucks on site moving that material away. And I think it's important to mention that, you know, the processing of the fines dump is it's a nice short-term way to help finance further exploration. That's sort of how I view it is, you know, potentially we can look to, you know, get some cash flow here to fund our further exploration plans at Tati. However, the big prize there is not so much in the fines dump. That's sort of you know, the cherry on the top, and it was sort of an unexpected thing that we found when we staked the ground, which I'm certainly not mad about. But the main reason we staked it, you know, continues to be what's still in the ground. And that's why we moved into that RC program quite quickly, because of the extent of what we saw on the ground. So the real prize there is potentially would be what's currently in the ground, and hopefully we can look to extend the mineralization at Good Hope along strike and down dip. And if we're able to do that, then obviously that's what the focus will be on. And just as a side note, I actually have a trip to Botswana planned coming up quite quickly here. So I will be on site at Good Hope as part of that project, as part of that trip. The main reason for the trip is Molopo, but I'm going to be spending a few days up at Good Hope touring around there. So I'll have a good idea as to what it looks like on the ground. But yeah, as mentioned, what we're really looking for is to extend the along strike and down dip extension of the main quartz reefs there.
Excellent. Okay, good to hear you're going out there as well, Oliver. Hopefully we can catch up on site with maybe a drill turning in the background at a suitable distance, so we don't disclose any cause that may or may not affect the share price of the company. Another question I have here on Tati: if Tati delivers decent results as well as Molopo, do both become priority projects? And again, what would you do in a finance situation there, Paul? Is there enough finance in place to support both?
They are very different projects. Molopo very clearly is going for a major nickel discovery across a very, very large footprint, district scale footprint with multiple targets. Tati, we are trying to build a picture as to what the remaining gold endowment is connected to Cherished Hope. So it's a different thing. It's hard to compare them, in fairness. There is going to be a considerable amount of value to, if we can confirm with Tati, a near surface high grade gold system that's capable of being mined, probably highly profitably. That will have a value. But to be able to compare that to what's happening with Molopo is difficult, in fairness.
Okay. So very different projects then. Okay. Right. Well, I just have some general questions left for you, Paul. I also do notice in the group someone was complaining that they've not heard. I'm not a geologist. I'm an accountant for my sins. So if you want to slip that one in before we finish, then please do. But just to get us started on the general points here, What's the latest on the upcoming IPOs, GMR and FDR? Are these still likely to list in 2022?
Okay, so in terms of the IPOs that we have in process, we've got Golden Metal Resources, and that pre-IPO preparatory work is effectively done, as we've said, and there's always a few extra bits and pieces to do. The First Development Resources is advancing through the process quite efficiently. Just had another meeting this morning. So it's difficult to give a precise percentage, but it's more than halfway in that sense. And there's a lot of work already been done. Then we have New Ballarat Gold, which is earlier stage in the process, but we're pushing hard to bring to life. Actually, a number of the things related to the IPO of that vehicle have been done, competent person reports and that kind of thing. And it's quite a simple structure, New Ballarat Gold. So it will be a more accelerated process. There is uranium energy exploration, where we've ended the writing back project into its own, or the subject to the listing happening, the vendor writing back. So that's being pushed forward at some pace as well, and is quite advanced. And there are other things that we're working on in the background as well. In terms of when they will happen, I am simply not allowed to, quote specific dates. And we have quoted in the past some target dates, and it hasn't worked out too well for us, in fairness. Market conditions, of course, are a key factor. You want to list a vehicle when conditions are reasonable. They don't have to be fantastic, but just reasonable and stable. So I've had lots of feedback and comments from investors about the conditions in the market. We do have an eye for that, and we are working with our brokers and our other advisors to consider that on an ongoing basis. And we are ready to roll with GMR, and we'll push that button when the right time comes. With the other vehicles, they're still in process. So when they get to the stage of readiness, the same situation will apply. We'll look at where we are with the market, and we'll push the button when the time is right. So these are major packages that we're dealing with here. That Power has quite a dramatic holding in. GMR has significant tungsten, copper, silver, zinc projects up at Pilot Mountain. An amazing opportunity with the Golconda Summit Gold property, and the Garfield and Stonewall properties alongside as well. And it's similar with FDR, and it's similar with New Ballarat. We need to get our timing right. And any sensible investor, I think, would recognize that that is the right way to do it. You don't simply push on and do everything immediately because you can. You sometimes have to take a little pause and just make sure that the conditions are right and everything is done in the right way. And that's exactly what we're doing with these highly valuable interests that we have.
Okay, excellent. So things are moving on, but the listing date's flexible depending on market conditions. Okay. Now, given sterling's weakness recently and the strength in the dollar, would it make more sense floating on the more attractive North American market for Oliver and GMR?
Oh, now that's an interesting question. People do worry when sterling is perceived as weak, and it's more the dollar strength, of course, rather than sterling weakness, as it were, because most of the currencies have suffered against the dollar of late. There is quite a dramatic interest and demand in North American projects in North America, not surprisingly. So there is that optionality, yes. I mean, there always has been, in fairness. Is it more now than it was before? I would say probably yes, because in the US there is a significant, noticeable drive to secure homeland security of strategic metals, particularly those that have those applications that are very much in demand, and obviously defense, green technology, power generation, that kind of thing, are acutely in focus at the moment. So we have an interesting scenario with the gold and metal resources package, whereby the inherent value of those interests has gone up considerably, I would say, in my view, in the last 12 months. And part of that is because of the very sad events that are happening in, Ukraine. But more generally, because of a demand for the homeland security of critical metals, as outlined by the US Geological Survey, including tungsten, is secured as quickly as possible. We also have the fact that if most of our interests, and particularly gold and metal, are denominated in USD, the GBP valuation of those interests has gone up 20% or so in the last 12 months, just because of the exchange rate. Whilst at the same time, in the junior resource markets, including London, there has been quite a significant amount of negativity in 2022, and we're still not out of it. Now, I'm old enough and I've had enough time in the market to know that the really negative phases yield very quickly into positive phases, which is why it's important to be ready with a listing to go, and we are. So I'm not pessimistic in terms of the markets at all. I've seen these swing arounds happen very quickly, and I just wanted to note that what's been achieved at Gold and Metal in bringing that package together and putting it into an absolutely clean state of readiness for listing has been quite significant. And I think it's worthwhile, if that's okay, just handing over to Oliver, just perhaps to give a few thoughts on Gold and Metal and the opportunity that the project package offers.
Yes, I think that's definitely worthwhile. And while Oliver, you're going to say a few words about it, I'll just put in the next question, which would be for you: is would there also be a drill program in place for GMR as soon as the company's listed? And if so, which of the 4 pilot mountain deposits would be classed as a priority?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, to answer your question, the plan would be to launch into drilling quite shortly after list, and we have a drilling contractor that I've worked with previously that we're sort of essentially on standby. So when we're ready to go, they essentially have a drill rig that's earmarked for us. So we're in a position where we can be quite flexible and we can move quite quickly, which is great. On which of the 4 deposits would be priority? Well, it would likely be Desert Scheelite, as that hosts about 90% of the current in-ground resource. And what's interesting there is there's a 500-meter along strike extension towards the east, and there was some geophysical work that was done there, which highlighted essentially a chargeability high, resistivity low, which corresponds essentially perfectly with the existing resource that extends for another 500 meters. So that's a very clear and high priority exploration target in my view. On top of that, the deposit's only been drilled to about 175 meters true vertical depth, and remains wide open at depth. So there's the opportunity to increase or to drill essentially down dip. So a long strike down dip at Desert Scheelite is certainly a priority. With that being said, and to answer the question, it would be Desert Scheelite, but the reality is where I think there could be even more potential is in between the 4 deposits. And the reason for that is, and if you look at any of the historic reports that were done, including the CPR by SRK, their top priority exploration target is actually in between the 4 deposits. Now, the reason for that is when you have 4 satellite deposits that are located approximately 1.5 kilometers from one another, and they all show very similar mineralogical and geological similarities, the reality is that they likely do connect up to some extent at depth. And the reason that no one's gone in and drilled between the 4 of them is the fact that in Nevada you can get sort of this post-mineral sedimentary cover. So specifically, we have sort of this thin sand cover that blankets most of the property, and the 4 deposits that have been drilled are the ones that are sort of poking out of the ground. So the priority for me, on top of Desert Scheelite, would be that area in between, and also towards the northeast. At Good Hope there, I think there's a lot of potential. So that's one of the reasons why we've gone and done this 3D IP survey. Is the one that was done previously identified a very high priority exploration target east of Desert Scheelite. And when I spoke to the geologist who operated the project previously, he said, go in there and do property-wide geophysics, because no one's really looked under the sand cover. And when you have those 4 deposits, as I mentioned, it's conceivable that they would connect up to some extent at a depth below that sand. So that's why we've gone and done that 3D IP. And I think, once we do get the results from that, I think that could open up certainly a lot of doors, and certainly identify a lot of priority drill targets on Pilot Mountain. And just to sort of loop this back to Molopo Farms, when you're doing geophysics in a brand new terrain, if you don't know what the geology is at depth, I mean, you get these bullseyes. You get, any geophysical survey is going to give you a bullseye or some sort of anomaly. But what do they all mean? I mean, in the case of Molopo Farms, we have the actual, nickel sulfides to corroborate what that conductor might be. And at Pilot Mountain, we have an existing in-ground resource at Desert Scheelite. So when you do geophysics over that, you get an exact response where your mineralization is. So we can use that information now with the IP we've done across the whole property to get a really good idea as to where to go next. And I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting drill targets that we can go and test once we do list. So that sort of is a quick overview of Pilot Mountain. That's obviously our flagship. It's the one that people certainly pay the most attention to. There's other assets in our portfolio that do not get much love. Golconda being one of them. It's an asset that's sort of near and dear to my heart. I used to work with Barrick Gold down in Nevada. I used to live there, actually, so that's one of the reasons why we pushed forward gold medal, is my experience and network in Nevada. So when I was down there, we were working on what is now an over 10 million ounce resource at Cortez Hills, which actually isn't that far from Golconda. And Golconda is essentially, it's in the same geological environment, same terrain. It's called Carlin-type gold. It's a very unique geological deposit that's found almost exclusively in northern Nevada. And Golconda Summit controls a very key part of one of the most prolific trends, which host Carlin-type gold. And on top of that, we have some really, really exciting gold assays at surface in what are called upper plate rocks, where you don't typically find good or strong Carlin-type gold mineralization. What you want to do is look for in the lower plate rocks. And I won't go into it too much from a technical standpoint, but long story short, we have really high-grade gold at surface in the upper plate rocks, and the lower plate rocks have not been tested at Golconda Summit, which is where all the big monsters and big discoveries are made in Nevada. So, for rightfully so, people are focused on Pilot Mountain, as they should be. But there's some other really interesting assets that are kind of waiting in the wings there that we're gonna drill and that we're gonna go test once we list here. So there's gonna be, we have the existing in-ground resource at Pilot Mountain, which gives a great sort of baseline valuation to the company. We have all that exploration blue sky at Pilot Mountain, which I just mentioned. And then we have, properties like Golconda Summit and Garfield. I mean, we just took 500 soil samples at Garfield, and I'm really bullish on that property as well. So I'll kind of leave it at that, but there's a lot going on at Pilot Mountain, as well as the other assets in the portfolio. And we're really looking forward to obviously getting listed, and more importantly, doing what I do, which is go and actually plan these exploration programs and carry them out.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like, yes, there's a lot to be cracking on with. While you're on, Oliver, there's a question here on Reitenbach. Why was Reitenbach specifically vended out? Was it location prospectivity?
Yeah. So if you look at our portfolio, the assets, this is almost more of a coincidence, but the assets, they're sort of broken out into different regional areas. There's, so based on that, there was sort of a natural fit of certain assets. And then with Reitenbach specifically, it's a big chunky asset. It's large, and it has a lot of smoke all over it, and a lot of really strong uranium mineralization at surface. And it's one of those assets where it's just so big that it deserves a standalone company to push it forward. So, there's other reasons potentially that Paul might touch on, but it was, first of all, it was sort of, there was 3 other groupings of 2 projects that we felt were natural fits based on their proximity. Because when you have 2 projects that are close, there's obviously symmetries, and you can save a lot of money on your exploration initiatives by working those projects in tandem. So Redenbach was sort of, it was its own entity. It didn't have a natural fit with any other properties in our portfolio. It was quite large, and we felt that it deserved a company that could, finance it, specifically, and go and explore it. So that's sort of, hopefully that answers that. I don't know, Paul, did you want to touch on that any further?
Yeah, we've built the business model, obviously, to make major discoveries, and those discoveries could come through our internal exploration or through spin-out vehicles or disposals where we have a big equity holding in the acquirer, that kind of thing. We wanted, starting in September 21, to build a significant portfolio in the Athabasca. We are great believers in the uranium developing story. Again, it's probably an age thing, but I can remember back to 2006-07 and the remarkable price responses of uranium juniors and the value that was delivered to investors in companies that had strategic uranium interests. It comes about very rapidly. I suspect this particular cycle in uranium will be an interesting one as the world ramps up to nuclear power quite dramatically. And we may well have some more longevity than the 2006-07 run. But when it comes along, there is no boom like a uranium boom. And for us, with Oliver, with his contacts, we had the opportunity to build quite a significant portfolio. And that's what we're carrying on doing. We've said that within the announcements. We're looking to make uranium acquisitions, not just in the Athabasca, but also in other jurisdictions as well, to build our uranium business. Now, we've been very careful with power to make sure along the way that we seek crystallization opportunities alongside building this expansive exploration portfolio. There is a value in having a very large land holding across many, many projects. It's almost an option on the future. If you believe the world will demand metal and the prices of metals will rise, then having these properties, key properties, is advantageous in itself. But there is a point when investors quite rightly would question your ability to fund and finance everything within your portfolio. Now, you can manage those costs in terms of the deals that you do to acquire new interest by staking your own properties at low cost, having control of the expenditure requirements. But there's no better way to articulate that you're in control of the finances, but by crystallizing as you go. And the Reitenbach opportunity gave us, with uranium energy exploration, and a route with the Athabasca to demonstrate that it wasn't just a land grab. It was thinking carefully about demonstrating value as we go. So it just fitted quite nicely with that business model of ours. And there will likely be more disposal events with regard to uranium as we build. As we've said within the RNS, we are looking at not just internal exploration, but also crystallizing value en route.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think I've just got a couple of questions left, unless any do start to come through. But one I have here could be Oliver or Paul, probably more Oliver. What characterizes or what characteristics make an A+ target as opposed to a B target, which is, of course, what you've announced with regards to Molopo recently?
Yeah, that's I was hoping someone would ask that, because that's a good question. I was a little disappointed it hadn't come up yet. So that's a great question. And to answer that, when we're looking at these targets, we have a team of people, including Roger and myself and other contractors and people that we work with in Botswana, and it's very much a team effort. And when when we get these, in this case, the moving loop EM results in hand, it's a comprehensive. It's typically a very long 2-hour Zoom call where we look at just that data specifically. And we all weigh in, and there's a lot of things that we discuss. One of them, and all these are important, but them together is what's important. So one of them is obviously the strength of the conductor, the strength of the response. Certain responses generally correspond to certain things in the subsurface. I mean, EM has been done all across the world, and lots of discoveries have been made on the back of it. So they know typically what sort of response corresponds with different types of mineralization, different types of formations, if you're in a carbonaceous unit, or if it's just, like I mentioned, groundwater could potentially cause a conductivity response. But there's a scale and a range as to what those conductivities look like. So obviously, we're looking for conductors that correspond to, semi-massive, massive type mineralization elsewhere in the world, and specifically within sort of South Africa, Botswana, South Africa. We're looking for sort of comparisons, direct comparisons between companies who have said, okay, here's an EM response. This is what this was the actual magnitude of it, and this is what we hit. So we have a very sort of good idea as to what certain responses correspond to or can correspond to. The size and the scale of the conductor is a very important factor. If a conductor is 200 meters by 600 meters, that's not going to be of huge interest to us, right? So we're looking for obviously larger conductors. In the case of 1.6, 2.3, and 1.3, those are all very sizable conductors, which is one of the reasons they were ranked where they were. And then I think most importantly is sort of tying all the different data sets together. Geology is a very interesting sort of science because it's very multidisciplinary. You need to essentially integrate many different data sets to actually come up with an answer or to come up with a sort of a solution to things, right? So when we're sitting down, we're looking at the geology, the geophysics, there's all these, the geochem, met service, all these different things play into actual making a final decision. So in this case, we're looking for conductors, as I mentioned previously, that are within or close to, number one, a geological feeder zone, and number two, within or close to a magnetic body, because we need a magnetic body to confirm that we're within the Molopo Farms complex. The MFC is actually it's a large geological body of mafic, ultramafic rocks. So we need to have that conductor close to or within a magnetic body. And if you notice in all the releases, and I encourage investors to sort of go back with this additional information, but look at the images I've put out and the additional commentary on where the magnetic body sits. And that's a very important factor, as I mentioned. The other thing is the depth of the conductor. So all of the priority conductors are, within 350 meters of surface. Conductors that are 6, 7, 800 meters, they could be excellent. They could be a deposit there, but I'm much more interested in things that are much closer to surface. Javieron is an interesting scenario where they drilled, a 500 meter deep, geophysical anomaly, and it's going to be a fantastic mine. But obviously the closer to surface you are, the better. So in the case of the 3 A+ conductors, they are all much closer to surface. So I don't want investors to think that we're just slapping A+ everywhere, every conductor we get, because we're not. There's a very sort of strict and coherent list of things that we look at. It just so happens that all three of the four, I guess, so far that we've looked at were satisfied enough of those requirements, if not all of them, to get to the point where we were confident in giving a sort of a very high priority rating.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, thank you, Oliver. So I think there's a couple of questions left here for Paul. Paul has mentioned in the past that there are always third parties watching from the sidelines. Have POW signed any NDAs?
Yeah, we get this question a lot. Well, an NDA is, of course, a non-disclosure agreement, which means I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
As a matter of course, I would say generically, most businesses that are pursuing significant metals projects, who are publishing their results, and the results are positive, will be on the radar of larger organizations in particular. They have their own internal research units. They are aware of what's going on. They are very clearly in need of pipeline, very eager to engage on material opportunities that could form part of that pipeline. It's not a secret. In the industry, it's very clear that there is considerable demand amongst large firms for new opportunities. And as we talked about before, how we would engage with interest depends on the situation we find ourselves in. We took a decision to push ahead quite proactively with the work program at Molopo. We did that deliberately with the geophysics and then into the drilling because we knew the potential, and it's beginning to pay off. I think the results we released from the geophysics and the T16 conductor on, I think, the 16th of August. I'm guessing around that time. Had a marked impact on our share price and the confidence of the investor base in our share, which is important for us. And we've backed that up and followed that up with a very rapid acceleration into drilling, which is now happening. So whilst we can't speak about anything specific where we may or may not have signed NDAs, it is a fair general comment to say there is a lot of interest in the type of work that we are doing, and we could only make any public announcement about anything if a commercial transaction or whatever had been signed, that approvals had been secured from our advisors and also from any third parties' perspective. And we put that out to the market.
Okay. Well, another question that you probably can't answer, Paul, but what do you think the true value of power is? And are you more confident of a large-scale transformational discovery now drilling is underway?
Well, we've always been oriented with our business approach to making large-scale discoveries. And it does require a degree of boldness and also to bring the market with you, which is quite difficult at times like this. For example, a couple of days ago, we released the geophysical update on T23, today T13, and the market reaction was muted. Does that mean that the news is poor? Well, quite no. I mean, the news, the last two pieces of news have been superb, and in a more buoyant market would have had a much bigger reaction. What tends to happen is that it feeds through, and it might not happen on a down day, but if people look at this stuff and then eventually you see the buying increase and you see a share price reaction. Where do I think the value is of power? I'm very impressed by a video that was done by Mark Bennett, who was the MD CEO of Sirius Resources in Australia, just after he made the Nova Bollinger nickel discovery, which saw the share price rise of Sirius from 5 cents to $5 in just about 8 months. Quite incredible demonstration of what our sector, can offer. The reality is, if we make a major discovery, I can't give you an indication as to what the value of power would be at that point. I can say that I think with the team that we've got and the work that we've done, we've not only built a quite dramatic portfolio, we've done work on it, and we've enhanced our knowledge of the properties. We've increased the inherent value of the properties. And we're now positioned at what we think is a unique point in history where there will be quite dramatic metal demand with a portfolio of what we consider to have immense value. Clearly, that value is most ably demonstrated on discovery when share price is rising, market caps rising, and there's a great deal of buzz and excitement. I do recall the days back in 2016 when as CEO of Metal Tiger, I refinanced Greatland Gold at 0.1 pence a share. And a good number of the investors really criticized me for investing in a moribund dead vehicle. Well, 5 years later, when it hit 38 pence and a market cap of 1.2, 1.3 billion, whilst holding effectively an earning agreement that would see it have 30% of Javier on, that's the moment I realized that there is no ceiling on major discoveries in terms of market caps, that investors' strength and almost belligerence by investing in the junior resource sector can pay off dramatically. And whilst it may be a bit depressing for us all as investors in the space at the moment, the reality is that if you invest in active companies targeting large-scale discoveries across district-scale projects, and they're doing work, any day you could wake up to that RNS that makes the difference and changes your life. Now, it may never happen. There is risk in this business. And in the case of Power Metal, there's risk. And we've diversified. We've got strong underlying financing. We've got, a great team. We're doing lots of work. But ultimately, these properties are high risk. But when they do pay off and they do deliver on market, it can be quite dramatic. So I'm optimistic, Mark, with regard to our value. The market has to decide, not me. I mean, if I could decide, I'd stick 20 pence a share on this tomorrow and think it was perfectly reasonable. But the market has us valued at, what is it now, 1.5-ish pence a share. I'm hoping that will increase materially. And if I wasn't hoping for that, then you should fire me as CEO.
Okay, well, there we are. Well, we are coming up, we're pretty much on an hour and a half, so we will wrap it up. There's just one last question that I will get in there that's just come in a couple of minutes ago. It is for Oliver. The original drill hole at target K1-6 at Molopo was located based on AEM data. It came close, but it did not intersect what is a large conductor. How accurate is the AEM? Should MLEM have been performed before drilling?
Yeah, that's another great question. So AEM data is it's very accurate, but it's much different than moving loop ground data. The reason for that is when the helicopter flies over the target, that sensor can only essentially read the ground for a few seconds at most, because that helicopter is moving at 150 kilometers an hour. So that's called what they call an early time response. So you just get sort of a quick glimpse as to what's in the subsurface. When you do the moving loop groundwork, the sensor's there for 20, 30 seconds. So you get what's called a late time response. And the reason that we've gone into do the moving loop is you get a much clearer picture of what's in the subsurface. And when we're I mentioned we have these meeting calls where we're spinning things around in Geosoft Target. We look at the airborne data that was originally targeted. And in general, the conductor that the airborne survey shows is quite grainy. The boundaries are not well defined. It's a very low resolution image. It's like if you take off your glasses and everything's kind of blurred, that's sort of what you're looking at. But the great thing about helicopter work is you can cover a massive area in a very quick amount of time and quite cheaply. So it's a great first pass. But once you have your airborne conductors identified, it's very advisable to go in there with groundwork to really define and refine where that conductor is, because it can shift, it can move, it can be down, it can be up, it can be northeast, southwest of where the airborne was telling you it was, and in some cases potentially it might not even be there. It might be a lot less of a response than what the airborne showed. So airborne is a great first pass exploration tool. And to answer your question about should the previous operator have gone in and done ground moving loop EM, in hindsight, probably yes. But obviously, there's a lot of factors at play. KKME, they were a private company who were the operator, so obviously there's funding things that need to be considered, and potentially they didn't have the funds to go and do that extra sort of step of preparatory work. So I think in hindsight, if they had more money, they certainly would have done it. But obviously now that we've taken over operatorship, we're a public company. We have access to funding, which allows us to do a few additional steps before we go and drill test. So yes, I mean, the reality is we did the moving loop and the conductor ended up being in a different spot than what was previously thought. So that obviously is an advantage to us. But yeah, I mean, that's hopefully gives you kind of an idea as to how we look at these things. And just to reiterate one more time, so there's 5 other priority AEM targets now that we've sort of moved up the pecking order. So, the next step there potentially would be to do additional moving loop groundwork, which we've done over 114, 16, 23, and 13, and I've gotten obviously some very exciting results out of 3 of those.
Excellent. Well, thank you both, Oliver Friesen and Paul Johnson, for your time today. That is an hour and a half, very active Q&A session there. Thank you everyone for joining as well and submitting your questions. Of course, this has been recorded and we will get that out as soon as we can. It should be probably later on today or certainly over the weekend. That recording will be available. But again, thank you, Paul and Oliver, for your time today and everyone for joining.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stopboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.